The moment Naledi Dube placed her hand on Kael Shin's chest, the most powerful man in South Korea forgot how to breathe. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. His lungs actually stopped cooperating. His heart, the same heart that had remained completely unmoved through hostile takeovers, boardroom wars, and his grandfather's funeral, suddenly decided it no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the pressure of her palm. To the warmth radiating through his shirt. To the way she was looking up at him with those impossible eyes, completely unaware of what she had just done to him. "You're shaking," she said softly. "I don't shake. Kael." Her voice was quiet. "Certain. You're shaking." He looked down at his own hand. She was right. He stepped back, put 3 feet of marble floor between them, and turned toward the window. Seoul glittered 40 floors below like it always did, cold, brilliant, indifferent. He pressed his fingers against the glass and told himself to collect it. All of it. Every fragment of composure that this woman had scattered across his penthouse floor in the space of a single accidental touch. He couldn't. For the first time in 15 years, Kael Shin could not collect himself. 72 hours earlier, he had been exactly who he was supposed to be. He was sitting at his desk on the 38th floor of Shin Industries reviewing an acquisition file for a logistics company in Busan when his phone rang. He let it ring 3 times, not because he hadn't seen the name on the screen, but because he needed a moment to prepare himself. Madam Shin Bak he never called without a reason. And her reasons were never small. "Grandmother. Come to the house." That was all she said. No greeting. No softness. She hung up before he could respond. He was in the car within 4 minutes. The Hanok estate sat on the eastern edge of the city, tucked behind walls of old stone and older silence. Kael had grown up inside those walls. He had also learned, inside those walls, that silence was not peaceful, it was expectant. It was the sound of duty waiting to be answered. Madam Shin Bak he was sitting in the main room when he arrived, wrapped in silk the color of dark plum, her spine straight despite everything her body was doing to her. The doctors had told him 6 months ago. Stage 4. She had told him nothing, as though illness were a weakness she refused to perform in front of him. "Sit down, Kael." He sat. "I'm dying." She said it the way other people said good morning. "Not today. But soon enough that we don't have the luxury of dancing around things." "Grandmother. I'm not finished." She folded her hands in her lap. "There is a condition to your inheritance. To your control of Shin Industries. To everything your grandfather built and everything I have protected since he died." She paused. "You will marry Naledi Dube. Solomon Dube's daughter. She is 24 years old, she is in Johannesburg, and you have 72 hours. The room was very quiet. "If you refuse," she continued, "everything transfers to Tae-shin. Every share. Every building. Every company bearing your family name." Kael looked at his grandmother for a long time. He was looking for a crack in her certainty, some small corner where negotiation might live. He found nothing. "Who is Solomon Dube?" Something moved across her face then. Something old and carefully maintained and very, very tired. "He was a man who saved my life 30 years ago," she said. "During the Johannesburg deal. When it collapsed and the men involved decided I was a liability." She paused. "Solomon Dube stepped in front of bullets that were meant for me. He took 2 of them. He refused every form of compensation I offered afterward. He asked for only one thing, that if his family ever needed help, would not look away. He died 6 months ago," Kael said slowly. "Heart attack. He left behind a daughter who is about to lose everything he built because of partners who are stealing from his estate." She looked at Kael directly. "His daughter needs protection. You need a reason to stop living like a machine. I am solving both problems at once. This is a business arrangement. Call it whatever helps you walk through the door. Kael drove back to the city in complete silence. His assistant called twice. He didn't answer. He was running the calculation the way he ran every calculation, stripping it of all irrelevant variables, identifying the most efficient path forward. Marry the girl. Keep the company. Maintain separate lives. Separate bedrooms. Separate everything. Once his grandmother passed, a quiet legal dissolution. Clean. Controlled. Bloodless. He had no idea. In Johannesburg, the afternoon light was the color of honey and grief. Naledi Dube was sitting at the kitchen table that had been her father's favorite place in the world, the place where he had drunk his tea every morning, read the newspaper even after everyone else had moved to phones, hummed old songs she didn't know the words to. The chair across from her was empty. It had been empty for 6 months and it still felt like an ambush every time she walked into the room. The lawyers had come again that morning. Partners from her father's logistics company, men he had trusted and built his business with over 2 decades, presenting documents she had never seen before. Documents that suggested her father had agreed, in the final months of his life, to sell his majority share. Documents that looked wrong in ways she couldn't fully articulate but felt in her chest like something rotten. She had no money for the kind of legal battle that was coming. She had the house, her father's old car, and $3,000 in an account that needed to last. When the call came from a Korean lawyer speaking in precise, careful English, she listened without interrupting. The arrangement was explained in full. The marriage. The timeline. The protection it would offer her father's estate through the legal and financial resources of Shin Industries. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at the photograph of her father on the wall. The one where he was laughing at something off camera, his eyes completely alive, his whole face given over to the joy of that specific moment. She had loved him with everything she had. She had trusted him with everything she had. "Okay, Dad," she said softly. "One more time. I'll trust you." She packed one bag. She didn't overpack. She didn't bring things meant to impress anyone. She brought what she needed and she got on the plane and she watched Johannesburg disappear beneath the clouds and she let herself cry for exactly 40 minutes because she had learned long ago that grief needed a container or it would swallow everything. By the time the plane began its descent into Seoul, her eyes were dry. Seoul from the air was nothing like what she had imagined. She had expected cold. She had not expected beautiful. The city spread below her like a circuit board lit up from the inside, dense and intricate and completely indifferent to the fact that she had never been here before, that she knew no one here, that she was about to walk into a life that belonged to a stranger. The car that met her at the airport was black and silent. The driver spoke no English. She watched the city pass outside the window and told herself that dignity was not the absence of fear. Dignity was feeling the fear completely and standing straight anyway. The penthouse was everything she had expected and nothing she wanted. It was the kind of space that had been designed to communicate power rather than comfort, all glass and steel and deliberate emptiness, as though warmth itself had been considered and rejected as architecturally inefficient. Kael Shin was standing in the center of it when she arrived. She had seen photographs. They had not prepared her for the actuality of him, the way he occupied space, the stillness that came off him like a temperature. He was looking at her the way she imagined he looked at acquisition documents, assessing value and risk simultaneously, his expression giving away absolutely nothing. "You're Naledi Dube," he said. "Yes." "Sit down." She sat. Not because he told her to, but because she chose to. She made a quiet note of the difference. He remained standing. He told her the terms. Separate bedrooms. Separate schedules. Public appearances as required. No emotional entanglements. No expectations. A marriage in name only until his grandmother's condition was resolved, after which a legal and private dissolution. He was precise. He was thorough. He was completely unapologetic. When he finished, he looked at her as though waiting for her to argue, to negotiate, to push back against something. "Agreed," she said. Something shifted in his face. "Not much. Just enough. Just like that. You've stated the terms clearly. I don't see what there is to argue about." He studied her for a moment longer. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" He didn't answer. But she watched his eyes move to hers and stay there for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, and she saw something pass through them, not warmth exactly, but recognition. Like he had found something in her face that reminded him of something in his own. She didn't ask what it was. The wedding was 4 minutes long. There were 3 witnesses. A registrar who looked like he performed exactly this kind of transaction every week. Papers signed, vows spoken in the minimum syllables legally required, a kiss that lasted approximately 1 second and involved no pressure from either party. But when the photographer asked them to stand together for the record, Kael reached for her hand. She noticed that he didn't let go immediately. She also noticed that he didn't seem to notice that he hadn't let go immediately. That evening, Madame Shin Baki called. "Kael. Grandmother. She is your wife. Not an acquisition. Not a transaction. Not a temporary inconvenience." A pause. "Treat her like she belongs there. Because she does." He stood at the window of his study for a long time after the call ended, looking at Seoul and trying to identify exactly what it was he was feeling. He had a vocabulary for quarterly projections and hostile bids and geopolitical risk. He did not have a vocabulary for this. He found Naledi sitting in the dark. Not crying. Not scrolling her phone. Just sitting by the floor-to-ceiling window with her knees drawn up and her eyes on the city below, present with something that had its own weight and texture. He stood in the doorway for a moment before she heard him. "You don't have to stay up," she said without turning. "I'm not tired." "Neither am I." He came and sat beside her. Not on the sofa, on the floor, which surprised him as he was doing it. Kael Shin did not sit on floors. He sat in chairs designed specifically for the dimensions of power. And yet here he was, on the marble, beside this woman he had married 4 hours ago, looking at the same city lights she was looking at. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "My father." "Tell me." She turned to look at him then, and he could see the surprise in her face, not at the question, but at the fact that he meant it. He used to say that Johannesburg at night looked like God had dropped a handful of stars and hadn't bothered to pick them up, she said. He was always saying things like that. Things that made ordinary things feel important. She was quiet for a moment. "I keep waiting to stop reaching for my phone to call him." Kael was quiet. "He was the kind of man who remembered everything," she continued. "Not facts and figures. People. He remembered what you told him 6 months ago and asked about it 6 months later. He made you feel like you were worth keeping track of." She exhaled slowly. "I don't know how to be in the world without someone like that watching." He was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to respond. "My grandfather died when I was 17, he said finally. His voice was different. Stripped of something. He was the only person in this family who talked to me like I was a person instead of a continuation of a legacy." He paused. "After he died, my grandmother told me that grief was not productive. That I needed to learn how to carry it quietly and keep moving." He looked at the city. "I have been carrying it quietly for 15 years. I am very good at it now." "That's not a compliment to yourself." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." Naledi looked at him for a moment. "Do you ever get tired of being untouchable?" Kael went completely still. The question landed somewhere beneath his sternum and stayed there, pressing gently against something he had spent 15 years reinforcing. He looked at her and she was looking back at him with those eyes that held no agenda, no calculation, no desire to wound, just an honest question from someone who had looked at him clearly and seen exactly what was there. Every single day, he said. Then why do you keep doing it? Because no one ever made it feel like a choice. He paused. Until right now. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back at the city. He looked back at the city. And neither of them spoke again for a long time, but the silence between them was different from what it had been before. It had shifted from empty to full. Eventually she said, I think we should sleep in the same room tonight. For appearances, if your grandmother visits or the staff talk. This is a penthouse. The staff are discreet. Kael. Fine. He lay on the far side of the bed with the rigidity of a man who had decided that stillness was a form of discipline. The distance between them was approximately 3 feet of linen and approximately 15 years of accumulated isolation. He was aware of her the way you are aware of a new sound in a room, not intrusively, just present. Impossible to stop noticing. Are you actually sleeping? She asked. No. Me neither. This is extraordinarily awkward. She laughed. It was a small laugh, a surprised one, like it escaped before she could decide whether it was appropriate. And something about the sound of it, small and unguarded and real, moved through him like warm water. Yeah, she said. It really is. In the dark, somewhere between not sleeping and not talking, his hand found hers. He didn't decide to do it. His hand simply moved and found hers and stayed there, and she didn't pull away. He stared at the ceiling. Something fundamental was rearranging itself inside him and he did not know how to stop it and was not entirely sure he wanted to. I've never done this, she said quietly. Any of it. I don't know how to pretend. He turned his head to look at her in the dark. Then don't pretend, he said. Neither will I. What happened between them that night was not performance. It was not the fulfillment of a contractual arrangement. It was two people who had been carrying enormous weight for a very long time setting it down for a few hours and finding, in the setting down, something that felt terrifyingly like relief. Afterward, the room was quiet in a way that felt earned. Was that, she started. Yes, he said. It was. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I've never. I know. Was it? Naledi. He said her name like he was trying out the weight of it. It was perfect. He reached for her hand again in the dark. She let him take it. He stared at the ceiling for a long time after she fell asleep, listening to her breathe, feeling the city hum 40 floors below, and trying to identify what it was that was happening to him. He had a very strong suspicion that he already knew. He was not ready to say it out loud. He woke before her. She was asleep on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, the morning light from the Seoul skyline falling across her face in a way that made something in his chest do something he had no name for. He lay still for a full minute looking at her before he remembered that he was Kael Shin and Kael Shin did not lie still for a full minute looking at anyone. His phone showed 14 missed calls from Sarah Han. He silenced it without opening a single one. Naledi opened her eyes. She looked at him. He looked at her. There was a moment of complete stillness between them, and then she smiled, small, unguarded, the same kind of smile as the laugh the night before, and everything in his chest tightened in a way that was almost painful. Good morning, she said. Good morning. You're staring at me. I'm aware. Is that something you do? Apparently it is now. She laughed properly this time, and he felt his own mouth pull into something. Not quite a smile, but the architecture of one. The suggestion of a man who had once known how to smile and was beginning to remember the mechanics. They ate breakfast together at the glass table that Kael had eaten every meal at alone for 3 years. She made tea. She made it wrong, too strong, the South African way, with milk going in first, and he drank it without complaint and privately thought it was the best tea he had ever had, which was insane, and he chose not to examine it. Then Sarah Han walked into his office at 11 in the morning. She arrived the way she always arrived, with theater. Head high, Heels deliberate, dressed for maximum impact, her expression calibrated to communicate that she was the wronged party in every room she entered. She had 3 of his staff trailing behind her before security could intercept, and she planted herself in the center of his office floor and looked at him like she was owed an explanation. "You got married," she said. "To a South African girl you've known for 3 days." "Yes. An arranged marriage. Because your grandmother is dying." She tilted her head. "Kael, this is embarrassing. For you, for her, for—" "Stop." The word was quiet. It had no heat and it had no volume. Which was exactly why every person in the vicinity felt it. He stood up from his desk slowly and looked at Sarah Han with the full concentrated attention he usually reserved for people who had attempted to betray him in ways that required a permanent response. "Her name," he said, "is Naledi Dube. She is my wife. And if you say her name with that tone in your voice one more time, I will make sure that every door in this industry that is currently open to you closes permanently." He paused. "She is not a footnote in anyone's story. She is not a footnote in yours. She is not a footnote in mine." Another pause. "We are done, Sarah. We were done before I married her. Be clear on that." The office was entirely silent. Sarah left. Kael straightened his tie. He returned to his desk. He picked up his phone and called Naledi. She answered on the second ring. "How are you doing?" he said. A pause. "Are you calling just to ask me that?" "Yes." Another pause. Softer. "I'm okay. How are you?" "I'm better now." He could hear her smile through the phone. He had no framework for why that mattered as much as it did. He was aware that he needed to build one quickly. 3 days later, Madame Shin Baki asked to see them both. She was in the sitting room of the Hannock estate, smaller than the last time he had seen her and simultaneously more present, the way sick people sometimes became more intensely themselves as their bodies grew quieter. She looked at Naledi for a long time when they arrived. Naledi met her gaze without looking away. "You have your father's eyes," Madame Shin said finally. "People tell me that. It is not a small thing." She was quiet for a moment. "Sit down. Both of you. I have something to tell you and I have been keeping it for 40 years and I am tired of its weight." They sat. "I did not arrange this marriage only because of debt," she said. "I arranged it because I made a mistake 40 years ago that I have had to live with every day since. And I arranged it so that you two would not make the same mistake." She looked at her hands. "I loved Solomon Dube," she said. "Not the way that one respects a person who saved their life. The way that changes the shape of everything that comes after." She paused. "We met 3 years before the Johannesburg incident. He was building his company. I was building mine. We met at a conference in Cape Town and we talked for 4 hours and I went back to my hotel room and knew that I was in trouble." Kael was very still. "It was 1984, she continued. Korea was not ready. My family was not ready. His family was not entirely ready either. We were an impossibility, an interracial relationship between a Korean businesswoman and a South African man, at a time and in a world that had very limited patience for impossibilities." She exhaled. "My family arranged my marriage to your grandfather. I accepted because I did not know yet that I was the kind of person who could choose differently. Solomon went back to Johannesburg. We did not speak for 25 years. The Johannesburg incident," Naledi said quietly. "He heard what was happening from a business contact. He flew in without telling me. He stepped in front of those men because," she stopped. She pressed her lips together for a moment. "Because he still loved me. After 25 years of silence, he still loved me. And I had spent those 25 years wondering whether I had chosen correctly, and standing in that hospital room looking at him after they removed the bullets, I knew with absolute certainty that I had not." The room was very quiet. He refused my money again, she said. He refused my guilt. He told me that he had a daughter he was raising alone since her mother passed, and that she was the best thing in his life, and that he only wanted one thing from me. That if anything ever happened to him, I would not let her face the world without the kind of support that changes outcomes. She looked at Naledi directly. He died not knowing that I had already decided I would do more than support her. I would give her the one thing I never got to have. She looked at Kael. And I would give you the one thing you have been starving for since you were 17 years old. Grandmother, Kael said. I spent 40 years wondering what my life would have looked like if I had been braver. Her voice was completely steady. Don't you dare spend 40 minutes wondering. Either of you. She reached out and took one of Naledi's hands and one of Kael's and held them. Solomon sent me his best thing. I am giving you mine. She looked at her grandson. Don't waste it. Don't you dare waste it. She died 11 days later. She died the way she had done everything, on her own terms, in her own home, at the time she had apparently selected. She had said everything she needed to say. She went quietly, both their hands in hers, the afternoon light coming through the hannock windows the color of honey. Kael did not cry at the funeral. Seoul's elite arrived in black cars and dark suits and expressions of appropriate grief to pay their respects to Madame Shin Bak-hee, who had been a formidable woman by any measure of the word. Kael stood and shook hands and received condolences with the composure that had been trained into him since birth, the face that showed nothing because to show something in this room would be to give the room a weapon. Naledi stood beside him the entire time. She didn't hover. She didn't perform grief on his behalf. She simply stood beside him with the particular kind of steadiness that is not the absence of feeling but the decision to be solid for someone who needs something solid to stand next to. When someone approached him with something painful, he could feel her presence on his right side like a hand pressed flat against his back. In the car, on the way home, he stared at the Seoul streets without seeing them. She reached across and cupped his face in both her hands and turned him gently to face her. He broke. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was the particular breaking of a man who has been holding something closed by force of will for 15 years and has finally, in the presence of someone safe enough, allowed the force of will to rest. His eyes filled and the tears came and he made no sound and she held his face and let him break without trying to stop it, without saying anything that would interrupt it, without looking away. He had never in his adult life cried in front of another human being. He couldn't explain why it felt like relief. Later, at the penthouse, when the silence had settled into something bearable, he looked at her across the kitchen and tried to find language for the thing that had accumulated inside him over the past 2 weeks. I need to tell you something, he said. She turned from the counter. Then tell me. I have spent my entire life making sure nothing could touch me. He stopped. Tried again. I have been very successful at it. Professionally. Personally. I built the coldness like a structure, something to work inside, something to operate from. I was good at it. He looked at her. And then you arrived with your one bag in your father's eyes and your complete refusal to be impressed by any of this. He gestured at the penthouse, at the city beyond it, at the whole architecture of his life, and you didn't even try to get through the wall. You just stood there being exactly who you are and the wall came down anyway. And I was standing in the rubble of it before I even knew it was happening. She was very quiet. Naledi. Her name in his mouth, the weight he put in it. I am not good at this. I have not been good at this in a very long time, maybe not ever. But I am telling you clearly, what I feel for you is not an arrangement. It is not gratitude. It is not proximity. He paused. It terrifies me in a way that nothing has ever terrified me. And I have never been more certain of anything. She looked at him for a long moment. Kael Shin, she said. You are the most terrifying man I have ever met. I know. I'm not leaving. He looked at her. I know that too. A pause. That's what terrifies me most. She crossed the kitchen and stood in front of him, and he looked down at her face and thought about what his grandmother had said about 40 years of wondering. He thought about Naledi Dube flying across a continent for a woman he had not spoken to in 25 years, stepping in front of bullets because love that size did not know how to stay practical. He thought that he understood it now in a way he never had before. He pulled her close and held her there, and Seoul moved below them in the dark, and he decided, quietly and completely, that he was done with walls. He did not know that 4 floors below, in the lobby of the building, a woman named Sarah Han was sitting in a car making a phone call. He did not know that somewhere in the city, a man named Kael Shin was reviewing documents that should never have left the family lawyers. And he did not know that at that exact moment, Naledi's phone, sitting on the kitchen counter 3 feet away, was receiving a message from a number she didn't recognize. She saw it first. She almost didn't open it. The hour was late and she was tired in the particular deep way that comes after grief, and she wanted nothing more than to stay exactly where she was, held by this man she hadn't expected to fall toward, in this city she hadn't expected to feel anything in. But the preview text was visible on the locked screen. It said, "Ask your husband what he did to her." She reached for the phone. The message contained a photograph. A young man, unmistakably Kael, years younger, a university student by the look of him, with his arm around a woman. The woman was slight and bright-eyed, her smile wide, her whole face given over to a happiness that was painful to look at because of what the accompanying text said. Her name was Hannah Lim. She is dead. He knows why. Ask him before it's too late for you. Naledi stared at the photograph for a long time. She looked up at Kael, who was standing at the window looking at the city, his back to her, his shoulders carrying some of their tension for the first time in days. She looked back at the photograph. She looked at the woman in the photograph, Hannah Lim, bright and alive and smiling at a younger version of the man she had just told she wasn't leaving, and she felt the floor shift very slightly beneath her feet. She didn't wake him that night. She sat by the window where she had sat on their first night, and she looked at Seoul, and she held the phone, and she thought about trust and what it cost and what it was built from, and whether 2 weeks was long enough to know anything about a person, or whether knowing the important things about a person had nothing to do with time. She thought about her father saying that some things you feel before you understand them. She thought about the way Kael had looked when he broke in the car after the funeral. You couldn't perform that. You couldn't calculate it. Whatever was in that man, it was real. But Hannah Lim was also real. And she was dead. And someone wanted Naledi to know about it. She woke him at 2 in the morning. She sat on the edge of the bed and she held the phone out and she let him see the screen, and she watched his face when he saw it. What she saw there was not the face of a man caught. It was not the face of a man calculating escape. It was the face of a man who had been expecting this moment for years and had hoped, desperately and unsuccessfully, that it would never come. He sat up slowly. He rubbed his face with both hands. He sat at the edge of the bed for a long moment that stretched like something being tested for how much it could hold. "Tell me," she said. "Naledi." "Kael." Her voice was very quiet. Very steady. "Tell me." He told her. He told her about Hannah Lim, who had been his girlfriend in his second year of university, sharp and warm and full of a particular kind of laughter that he had not known at that point what to do with. He told her about the 2 years, and about the morning Hannah had told him she was pregnant, and about what he had done with the fear that followed. He had gone to his grandmother. He had told her. And Madame Shin Bak-hee, who had loved him and shaped him and also been a product of a time and a system that had very little patience for disruption, had told him what would happen to his future, his inheritance, his position in the family, if he proceeded with the pregnancy. She had given him money. She had told him what to do with it. He had given the money to Hannah. He had not been with her. He had told himself it was her choice, her decision, that he was providing resources and leaving the agency with her. She had gone to a clinic that had taken the money and done its work carelessly. She had hemorrhaged. By the time anyone understood the severity, she was gone. Kael Shin, 19 years old, the heir to a dynasty, the coldest Chaebol in a city full of cold men, had spent the following 15 years building a wall around the thing that had happened and living inside it so that it could not touch him. The wall was his entire personality. The wall was everything Naledi had watched come down. When he finished talking, the room was the quietest it had ever been. "Get out," she said. "Naledi." "Please," she said. Not angry. Not cold. Just broken in a way she was not going to let him see the full depth of tonight. "I need you to go. Please." He went. He sat in the study until the sky changed color, and then he sat some more, and he did not try to fill the silence with anything because there was nothing he could put in it that would help. In the morning, he made calls. It took him 2 days to locate Hannah Lim's family. A mother and a younger sister living in Incheon. He arrived unannounced, which he recognized was not ideal, and he stood at the door of the small apartment and he told the mother who he was and what he had come to say. He apologized. Not in the way of lawyers and corporate damage control. He apologized the way his grandmother had never been able to teach him to, completely and without reservation, as a person to a person, without anything underneath it except the plain acknowledgement that he had failed catastrophically at the most basic human obligation of showing up for someone who needed him. The mother was quiet for a long time. Hannah wanted to be a teacher, she said finally. Primary school. She wanted to teach children how to read. "I know," he said. "I would like to establish a scholarship in her name. For young women pursuing education degrees. If you'll allow it." He paused. "Not to compensate. There is no compensation. To honor what she was going to be." The mother looked at him for a long time. "Hate is heavy," she said. "I have been carrying it. I am tired." She paused. "Hannah would not have wanted me to carry it forever." A pause. "Go be the person she saw in you. She always believed there was one." He sat in the car outside afterward and pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and breathed. Then he went home. Naledi was sitting at the kitchen table. She had been crying, he could see the evidence of it, though she was dry-eyed now. She looked at him when he came in and waited. He told her about the visit. About the mother, about Hannah's dream of teaching, about the scholarship. He told her about the conversation on the doorstep and what the mother had said at the end. "She forgave you," Naledi said. "She let go," he said. "I'm not sure that's the same thing. But she let go." Naledi was quiet for a long time. "I understand guilt," she said finally. "I understand being 19 and terrified and making a choice because the fear is so loud you can't hear anything else." She looked at him. "I am not excusing what happened. I am not going to pretend it didn't happen. But I am also not going to pretend that the person you were at 19 is the whole truth of who you are." "Naledi. Let me finish." Her voice was steady. "What you did was cowardice. Real cowardice, with real consequences, that a real person paid for. That is true and you have to carry it." She paused. "But you went to her family. You didn't send lawyers. You went yourself. You stood there and you said the words without anything protecting you." She looked at him. "That is not nothing." He was quiet. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I said that and I meant it. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more walls. No more silence. No more things you carry alone that should be carried together." She held his gaze. "We are in this. We are actually in this. That means all of it." "All of it," he said. "I promise." She stood up and crossed the kitchen and he held her and he thought about Hannah Lim's mother carrying hate until she was tired. He thought about his grandmother carrying 40 years of wondering. He thought about the weight that accumulated in people who chose silence over the terrifying work of speaking. He was done with weight. He was done with silence. He held Naledi and he let himself be held, and outside the window Seoul moved through another morning with complete indifference, and he thought that was fine. It could be indifferent, he had everything he needed right here. He should have known it wasn't over. He should have known, because things that are worth having are always contested. 2 weeks after the scholarship was established, 2 weeks of cautious and deepening peace, Naledi's phone rang with a number she didn't know, and she answered it because she answered every unknown number since her father died in case it was something about the estate. It was Sarah Han. "I thought we should talk," Sarah said. Woman to woman. "I'm going to stop you," Naledi said. "Whatever you're about to tell me, consider first whether you are telling it because it's true and you believe I deserve to know, or whether you're telling it because it costs you nothing and damages me." Silence. "Meet me," Sarah said. "If you're confident in what you have with him, you won't be afraid to hear what I know." Naledi should have called Kael. She knew that. She knew it clearly, and she made a different choice because there was something in her that needed to face this particular thing herself, needed to know that she could stand in front of whatever was coming and not fall over. She met Sarah at a cafe in Gangnam. Sarah was dressed beautifully, which Naledi suspected was armor, and she had an envelope on the table in front of her, which Naledi suspected was a weapon. What came out of the envelope were photographs. Kael with a woman Sarah identified as a business contact, timestamps and locations implying meetings that hadn't appeared on any schedule. Financial transfers to accounts in names neither of them recognized. Documentation suggesting a connection between Kael and Kael Shin that went beyond mere family rivalry. Naledi looked at the photographs without touching them. "Kael Shin has been draining corporate funds for 8 months, she said. "Those accounts are the trail. Kael found them 3 weeks ago." She looked at Sarah steadily. "The woman in the photographs is his corporate lawyer. I've met her." She paused. "You need to be very careful, Sarah, about who prepared these documents for you, because whoever it was is using you to do something you don't fully understand." Sarah stared at her. "Kael is going to find what Kael Shin has been doing," Naledi continued. "When he does, everyone who helped will face consequences. I would think carefully about which side of that you want to be on." She stood up. "I hope this was worth the coffee." She called Kael in the car. She told him everything, the meeting, the photographs, the accounts. He was silent in a way she had learned to read as operational rather than emotional, his mind moving through the problem. "The accounts," he said. "I already have them. I've had them for 3 weeks. I know. I told her." A pause. "Naledi." She was going to keep coming, she said. She needed to understand that it wasn't going to work. Another pause. Then, quietly, "You walked into that meeting alone to protect us." "Yes." The word that followed was not really a word. It was a sound. The sound of a man who had spent 15 years making sure nothing could touch him, being touched anyway, all the way through. The board meeting came 14 days later. Kael Shin arrived prepared, which Kael had anticipated. He arrived with supporters and documentation and the argument that Kael's recent behavior, the marriage, the personal distractions, the unexplained travel, the missed investor calls, represented a pattern of compromised leadership that Shin Industries could not afford. Kael let him finish. Then he presented 8 months of financial records. 47 unauthorized transfers. 6 shell companies created under names that could be traced, with patience and the right legal resources, directly back to Kael Shin, and 3 board members who had apparently made the calculation that loyalty was less valuable than positioning. Kael Shin was removed from the building before the meeting ended. 3 board members tendered resignations by the following morning. Shin Industries was stable. Kael came home and found Naledi asleep on the sofa with her feet tucked under her and a half-finished cup of tea on the table beside her, and he stood in the doorway for a long moment looking at her and thinking about everything that had been required to get here, the 72-hour ultimatum, the cold wedding, the night by the window, the breaking in the car, the weight of Hannah Lim and the grace of her mother, the board meeting, all of it, and he thought it was, accounting for everything. The most efficient path to anything worthwhile he had ever taken. He sat on the floor beside the sofa and rested his head near her hand and closed his eyes. He was asleep in 3 minutes. She found him there in the morning. She looked at him sleeping with his suit still on the floor beside her, and she felt something so large and so warm she didn't have a name for all of it, only the part that mattered, which was that it was real, and it was hers, and she was keeping it. "Kael," she said softly. "I'm awake. You're on the floor. I'm aware. Why are you on the floor?" He opened his eyes and looked up at her. "Because you were up here." She looked at him for a moment. Then she lay down on her side and looked at him at floor level, and they looked at each other across the small distance between the sofa and the marble, and Seoul moved outside the window in its perpetual indifferent morning, and neither of them needed to say anything. Some things didn't need to be said. They were already the truest thing in the room. If you made it to the end of this story, you already know what this is. It's the kind of love that doesn't ask permission, the kind that arrives in a single bag with a father's trust and a quiet refusal to perform. Naledi and Kael are just getting started. There is more story, more truth, more of what happens when two people decide to stop carrying things alone. If this moved you at all, if you felt even one moment of what they felt, hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing and it means everything to this channel. Subscribe so you don't miss part 2. The secrets are not finished. The love is not finished. And what's coming will hit harder than anything you just read. Drop in the comments, are you Team Naledi, or did Kael completely win you over? Tell us the exact line that got you. We read every single one. Part 2 is coming. Don't miss it.